Welcome to everyone. Welcome to your deep dive into quantum key distribution, or QKD for short. You ready to unlock some secrets?
Absolutely.
Okay.
This is a really exciting area, and especially these days when we've got all this talk about, super powerful computers that could just, crack all of our codes. That's where QKD comes in.
Yeah, and it's like using quantum mechanics to protect our data. I mean, that's mind-blowing. So in this deep dive, we're going to be looking at the work of Yorgao Schneeppap. He's done some fascinating research on QKD. And he asked some really intriguing questions in his work. Like, could this really be the future of cybersecurity? Could this be how we keep everything safe online? And can we really beam down unbreakable codes from satellites? Like, is that really a possibility?
Schneeppap really highlights that this is urgent. Like, we're in a race against time. You know the way we keep things safe online right now? Things like RSA encryption. They rely on really complex math problems that are hard for regular computers to solve. But what happens when computers get so powerful? Or what happens when we have quantum computers? That can just crack those codes. That's a problem.
Yeah, that's a little scary. So how does QKD offer a different approach? What's the secret sauce here?
Well, Schneeppap really emphasizes the role of quantum mechanics here.
Oh, this must be quantum.
Right. So, quantum mechanics, it's like a whole different set of rules. It's not how things work in our everyday world.
Right. It's very counterintuitive.
Totally. So one of the key concepts here is superposition.
Okay, what's that?
So imagine a coin spinning in the air. Until it lands, it's both heads and tails at the same time.
Right.
And that's kind of how quantum particles are. They exist in multiple states at once until you measure them.
Whoa.
And then there's entanglement. This one's really wild. Imagine two particles that are linked together no matter how far apart they are. So if you measure one, you instantly know the state of the other one.
It's like they're communicating faster than the speed of light or something.
Yeah, it's like spooky action at a distance.
Okay, that's definitely mind-bending. But how do we actually use these concepts to create these unbreakable keys? I mean, it's cool in theory, but...
Right, so Schneeppap goes into the different QKD protocols. One of the earliest ones is called BB84.
BB84. Oh,
yeah.
Tell me more about that.
So imagine Alice wants to send a secret key to Bob.
Yeah, classic Alice and Bob.
Right. So in BB84, Alice sends photons, which are these tiny particles of light. And each photon is polarized in one of four possible directions. You can think of it like setting a filter on a flashlight. Only light aligned with the filter gets through.
Got it.
Now, Bob, he has a similar filter, but he doesn't know which direction Alice used for each photon.
So he's got to guess.
Yeah, basically, he randomly chooses a direction to measure the photon.
So there's like a chance element involved.
Right, and that's what makes it secure.
I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
So after sending the photons, Alice and Bob, they talk over a regular channel, and they revealed the directions they use for each photon.
But not the actual measurement result.
Exactly. They only keep the data where their directions matched.
Okay, so that becomes their shared secret key.
Right. It's like they're sifting through all the possibilities and only keeping the ones where they were on the same wavelength.
I like that analogy. So that shared string of bits is their key. But how does this actually prevent someone from eavesdropping?
That's the beauty of it. If Eve tries to listen in and measure those photons, without knowing the correct direction, she'll introduce errors.
Wait, why is that?
Because in quantum mechanics, measuring something actually disturbs it.
So Eve can't just peek at the photons without leaving a trace?
Nope, she can't. And Alice and Bob can compare a subset of their keys to check for these errors. If there are too many errors, they know someone's been listening, and they discard the key.
Wow. So it's like the act of eavesdropping itself triggers an alarm. That's amazing. Now, Schneeppap also talks about another protocol called E91 that uses entanglement, right?
Yes, E91 is all about those linked particles we were talking about.
Remind me how that works again.
So Alice and Bob each receive one photon from an entangled pair, and they measure their photons in random directions. But because the photons are linked, their measurements will always be correlated, no matter how far apart they are.
So even if they're miles apart?
Thousands of miles, even. If Alice measures her photon as horizontally polarized, Bob's photon will also be horizontally polarized.
It's like they're two halves of the same coin.
Exactly, and that correlation becomes the basis for their secret key.
So even if someone intercepts one of the photons...
They can't get any useful information, because they don't have the other half of the entangled pair.
It's like trying to decode a message with only half the letters.
Exactly.
So this entanglement thing is like the ultimate security guarantee.
Pretty much.
So we've got these amazing protocols, BB84 and E91, that use quantum mechanics to create these unbreakable keys. But this all seems very theoretical. How do we know it actually works in the real world?
Well, that's where we move from the quantum realm to real-world applications. And that's what we'll be talking about in the next part of our deep dive.
Excellent. Can't wait to hear more about that. Okay, so we've gotten a good grasp on the theory behind QKD, BB84, E91, all that good stuff. But as Jorgo Schneeppel points out, moving from theory to the real world, well, it always gets messy.
Why? Exactly. In the real world, you got hackers trying to break into everything.
And they're clever.
Oh, yeah, they're always looking for weaknesses. Even in systems that are based on, the laws of physics.
So how do those attacks even work? Like, can someone actually hack a QKD system, even with all this quantum stuff protecting it?
Well, it's not that easy, but there are definitely points where traditional cybersecurity comes in.
Okay, so where are the weak spots? What would a hacker try to exploit?
So one thing they might try is eavesdropping.
Like we talked about before with Eve trying to intercept the photons.
Right. But in the real world, it's not that simple. Hackers are going to try to be more sophisticated. They don't want to just blunder in and get detected.
So they're going to try to be stealthy.
Exactly. They might use techniques like photon splitting.
Okay, photon splitting, that sounds kind of ominous.
It is. Basically, instead of measuring the whole photon, Eve tries to siphon off just a tiny portion of its energy.
Like a little quantum vampire.
Ha! Yeah, kinda. And they hope that by taking such a small piece, they won't disrupt the overall quantum state enough to trigger the alarm.
So they can steal a little bit of information.
And hopefully go unnoticed.
That's really sneaky. But can QKD systems even defend against something like that?
They can. Schneeppel talks about some of the countermeasures that have been developed.
Okay, what?
Well, one method is to use decoy states.
Decoy states. What are those?
So Alice sends photons of varying intensities. Some are
Yeah, let's see where this is going.
right. They're like bait for Eve. She's more likely to try and split the weak photons because they're less likely to cause a noticeable disturbance.
Ah, but it's a trap.
Exactly. By analyzing the error rates on those decoy states, Alice and Bob can actually detect Eve's presence. And they know to discard the key.
It's like a quantum game of chess. So they're always one step ahead. Well, hopefully. But are there other vulnerabilities Schneeppel talks about? I mean, photon splitting can't be the only trick hackers have up their sleeves.
You're right to be cautious. There are always new threats emerging. Another potential weakness is the hardware itself.
To hardware.
Yeah. QKD systems rely on these really specialized devices, like single photon detectors.
Right, those things that can detect like a single particle of light.
Yeah, they're incredibly sensitive, but that also means they can be vulnerable.
Vulnerable how?
Well, one example is a Trojan horse attack.
Trojan horse. Like the Greek myth.
Yeah, kind of like that. In this case, imagine someone sending carefully crafted light pulses into the detector.
What would that do?
Well, the goal is to try and extract information about the key generation process.
So it's like planting a spy within the system itself?
Exactly.
That's pretty devious.
It is. It's a real challenge to defend against.
So how do we protect these sensitive detectors?
Well, researchers are working on several approaches. One is to develop detectors that are just less susceptible to these kinds of attacks. Another strategy is to incorporate multiple detectors.
Okay, so if one detector gets tricked,
the others can cross-check and see if something's fishy.
That's clever.
It makes it much harder for Eve to manipulate the system without getting caught.
So it's like a constant arms race. Hackers finding new ways to attack, and researchers developing new ways to defend.
Exactly. That's the nature of cybersecurity.
It kind of makes you wonder, is any system truly secure?
It's a good question. But what makes QKD different is that the security isn't based on some complex math problem that a computer could eventually solve. It's based on the laws of physics. As long as quantum mechanics holds true, those eavesdropping detection capabilities of QKD, they remain strong.
Okay, that is reassuring. But with all this talk about attacks and vulnerabilities, it makes me wonder, is QKD actually being used out there in the real world? Or is this all just theoretical?
Oh no, QKD is definitely moving beyond the lab and into real-world applications.
Yeah.
And that's what we're going to explore next.
Oh, perfect. Because I'm ready for some real-world examples. Okay, so we've talked about the theory, we've talked about the potential attacks, but now I want to know, is QKD actually being used out there in the real world? Are people actually using this stuff?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's moving beyond the lab.
Yeah.
And into some really interesting applications.
So where is QKD making the biggest impact right now? Like what kind of information needs this level of quantum protection?
Well, one area is government and military communications.
Makes sense.
When you're dealing with top secret intelligence. Or coordinating sensitive military operations. You want to make sure that those communications are truly unhackable.
Right, because if someone could intercept those messages,
it could be catastrophic.
So QKD could really make a difference there. What about other sectors?
Another key application is in finance.
Finance, yeah, that makes sense too.
Protecting our bank accounts, our online payments, all that sensitive financial data. It's paramount these days.
Especially with all the online transactions happening.
Exactly. So QKD adds this extra layer of security. That makes it virtually impossible for hackers to steal our financial information.
Okay. That does make me feel better about all my online shopping.
Yeah.
But QKD's potential goes beyond just government and finance, right?
Absolutely. Healthcare is another big one.
Healthcare. I can see that.
Hospitals and healthcare providers, they handle so much sensitive patient data, medical records, genetic information, clinical trial data. All of that needs to be protected.
It's really valuable information.
Extremely valuable. And QKD can provide that secure channel for transmitting it, ensuring patient privacy, and safeguarding against data breaches.
So QKD is already making its mark in these high-stakes sectors.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any specific examples of QKD deployments that really showcase its potential, like real-world examples?
Yeah, definitely. One notable example is China's Mauritius quantum satellite.
Mauritius.
Yeah, it was launched back in 2016, and it was the world's first quantum communications satellite. It successfully demonstrated satellite-based QKD, transmitting entangled photons to ground stations thousands of kilometers apart.
So they were beaming down unbreakable codes from space.
Pretty much.
That's incredible. Are there any real-world QKD networks here on Earth?
Yeah, there are actually. Several countries, including the United States, Canada, and some European nations, they have pilot QKD networks in operation.
What are they using them for?
Well, these networks connect government agencies, research institutions, and businesses with these ultra-secure quantum communication links.
So it's like a test run for wider adoption.
Exactly. They're testing and refining the technology.
Okay, so it's all very exciting. But I got to ask, is QKD a perfect solution? Are there any limitations or challenges that still need to be addressed?
Yeah, that's a good question. While QKD is incredibly promising, it does have its challenges.
Okay, like what?
Well, one limitation is distance.
Distance.
Yeah, transmitting photons over long distances. Especially through fiber optic cables, it can lead to signal loss and errors.
So the further the photons travel, the more likely they are to get lost or scrambled.
Exactly.
How do we overcome that?
Well, researchers are working on something called quantum repeaters.
Quantum repeaters?
Yeah, these are devices that can amplify and extend the range of quantum signals without sacrificing security.
So they're like boosters for our entangled photons.
Exactly.
That's pretty cool. But are they actually working?
They're still in the early stages of development.
But if they work,
they could be the key to building global quantum communication networks.
Okay, so that's one challenge. Distance. What else?
Another hurdle is cost.
Yeah, cost is always a factor.
Right. QKD systems require specialized hardware and expertise, which makes them pretty expensive to deploy.
But I imagine as the technology improves,
the cost will come down.
Yeah, just like we've seen with other technologies.
Exactly. It's just a matter of time.
Okay, so looking ahead, what's the future of QKD? What are researchers working on that has you excited?
Well, one area that I'm really excited about is device-independent QKD.
Device-independent QKD. That's a mouthful.
It is. But it's a really important concept. You see, current QKD systems, they rely on the assumption that the devices generating and measuring the photons are trustworthy.
So we're assuming that no one has tampered with the hardware.
Exactly. But what if we could remove that assumption?
Is that even possible?
That's what device-independent QKD is all about.
So even if someone managed to sneak a bug into the hardware,
the system would still be secure.
That's impressive.
Yeah.
What else is on the horizon?
Another exciting area is the integration of QKD with other technologies.
Like what?
Well, for example, combining QKD with post-quantum cryptography.
Post-quantum cryptography.
Right. This is a whole new class of encryption algorithms that are designed to resist attacks from quantum computers.
So it's like a double layer of protection.
Exactly. You've got QKD protecting the key exchange and post-quantum cryptography protecting the data itself.
That sounds pretty unstoppable.
It's the future of cybersecurity.
Okay, so we've talked about the technical advancements, but what about the bigger picture? How might widespread QKD adoption change the world?
That's a great question. If QKD becomes as ubiquitous as the internet, it could revolutionize how we think about online security and privacy.
In what way?
Well, imagine a future where all of our sensitive data, Financial transactions, medical records, even our personal communications, all protected by the unbreakable laws of quantum mechanics.
That's a pretty amazing vision.
It's a future where we can finally have trust and confidence in the digital realm.
Yeah, I like the sound of that. So to wrap things up, what's the key takeaway you want our listeners to remember about QKD?
I think the most important thing to remember is that QKD is not just some futuristic concept, it's a reality that's happening right now. It offers a level of security that's unmatched by traditional methods, and it has the potential to transform how we protect information in the years to come.
Well said. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the fascinating world of quantum key distribution. It's been an incredible journey, and we hope you've learned something new. And are as excited as we are about the future of cybersecurity, keep those quantum questions coming, and never stop exploring.